Have you ever noticed yourself getting out of bed in the morning and pausing for just one quiet second before taking that first step? Not because something hurt, not because you were afraid, just because your body seemed to want a moment to arrive before moving. A surprising number of people over 70 have experienced this exact thing without ever really talking about it. It happens so quietly that it barely feels important at all. A hand resting lightly on the mattress edge before standing. A brief stillness in the kitchen before turning around. A slower step when the lighting changes from bright to dim. Not dramatic changes, not obvious weakness. Just tiny moments where movement becomes a little more aware of itself. And maybe that is one of the most overlooked changes that comes with aging. Because after 70, the body often stops moving automatically and starts moving collaboratively. It begins checking in with the world around it, the floor, the lighting, the direction of motion, the certainty beneath each step. And strangely enough, this does not always feel like decline. Sometimes it feels more like wisdom, arriving quietly through movement. The body is not suddenly fragile. It is simply becoming more thoughtful. And for many older adults, this shift happens long before anything visible changes from the outside. If you've ever noticed yourself slowing down for just a second, before moving naturally again, consider liking and subscribing if this feels familiar. There was a man named Harold who used to get out of bed the same way every morning for most of his adult life. One smooth motion. Feet down. Stand up. Walk away. But sometime after 72, mornings became slightly different. Not difficult. Just more deliberate. Now, when his feet touched the floorboards, he stayed there for a second, quietly sitting, letting his body orient itself before standing. At first, he thought it was strange. Then one morning, he realized something important. His body was not hesitating because it was incapable. It was checking for certainty before momentum, and once he stood, he moved normally again. That tiny pause lasted maybe 2 seconds. But inside those 2 seconds was a new relationship with movement. Younger movement is automatic. Older movement becomes intentional, and there is nothing shameful about that. Later that same morning, a woman named Denise carried a cup of coffee from her kitchen island into the living room. She crossed from tile flooring onto hardwood without consciously thinking about it at first. But halfway through the transition, her pace softened slightly. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Just enough for her body to feel the surface change beneath her feet. She realized she had started paying attention to textures now. Different floors, different shoes, different levels of traction. Years ago, she would have moved quickly without registering any of it. Now, her body preferred information before speed. And surprisingly, that awareness made her feel calmer instead of older. Movement changes quietly before it changes visibly. Sometimes, stability becomes something your body gently negotiates, not out of fear, out of intelligence. Around noon, Martin walked through his hallway carrying folded laundry. The house was bright near the kitchen, but the hallway ahead was dimmer. As soon as he entered the darker area, his body naturally slowed down. He did not decide to do it consciously. It simply happened. His eyes adjusted more carefully now. His feet preferred clarity. And while walking, he noticed something else. He no longer liked sudden direction changes in lower lighting. So instead of pivoting quickly, he began turning his whole body together. Slower, smoother, more connected. At one point, he almost laughed to himself. Not because anything was wrong, but because he realized his body had started moving with strategy, like it wanted cooperation instead of urgency. The body begins choosing certainty over speed. And maybe that is not weakness at all. Maybe it is awareness arriving. That afternoon, Eleanor crossed a parking lot outside a grocery store. Years earlier, she never thought about parking lots. They were simply empty stretches between places. Now she noticed everything: paint lines, slight slopes, small cracks in the pavement. the difference between bright sun and shadow. She noticed herself watching the ground more than she used to, not anxiously, just attentively. And when she reached the curb near the sidewalk, something subtle happened. Her foot paused half a heartbeat before stepping upward, almost like her body wanted confirmation. Distance checked, height confirmed, then step. She realized this tiny adjustment had become part of her daily life, not instability, calibration. The body learning to move with a little more conversation between the eyes, the feet, and the ground. Carefulness is not failure, it is awareness arriving. Later that day, Thomas was talking with his daughter while walking through the backyard. She said something behind him and he turned to answer while still moving forward. But instead of twisting quickly from the waist like he once would have, his whole body rotated more slowly together. Head, shoulders, feet, one connected motion. And for a brief second, he noticed it. His speech had turned faster than his body wanted to, so his body quietly asked for more time, not because it could not move, because it preferred coordinated movement now. He realized that, after 70, balance is no longer just about standing upright. It becomes connected to transitions, turning, redirecting, adjusting, reorienting. Movement becomes more thoughtful in the spaces between actions. That realization stayed with him all evening, especially the strange comfort inside it. Because his body was not betraying him, it was communicating more honestly than before. A woman named Gloria noticed something different while shopping one afternoon. She had only planned to buy 3 items: milk, bread, soup. But instead of carrying a basket, she reached automatically for a shopping cart. At first, she thought it was habit. Then she realized something gentler. The cart had become part of the rhythm she trusted. Not because she desperately needed support, but because movement felt smoother with a point of contact nearby. She liked the grounded feeling of it, the pacing, the steadiness, the sense that her body could relax slightly while moving through space. And while standing in the checkout line, she realized something many older adults eventually discover. Sometimes the body stops trying to prove independence every second. Sometimes it simply chooses comfort, and there is wisdom in that too. Your body is becoming more deliberate, not weaker. As evening approached, Leonard stood in his kitchen waiting for the microwave to finish heating dinner. Without thinking about it, he leaned one hip gently against the counter. Not heavily, not dramatically, just enough to reduce the work of standing still. Years ago, he would have remained upright without noticing the effort. Now his body preferred shared support during pauses. And the interesting part was this. Walking still felt mostly fine, but standing motionless had quietly changed. He noticed that stillness now required awareness too, especially at the end of the day, especially when energy became softer. So his body adapted, tiny lean, tiny adjustment, tiny redistribution of effort, and suddenly he understood something he had never considered before. Balance is not only about motion. Sometimes it is about how the body rests between movements. That night, Patricia walked upstairs carrying a folded sweater. She reached the staircase and instinctively placed her hand slightly closer to the railing than she used to. She did not grip it. She simply moved near it, like her body enjoyed knowing it was there. And as she climbed, she realized something emotional. She had stopped treating support like surrender. Now she treated it like partnership. The rail was not evidence of weakness. It was part of the environment her body collaborated with. The wall beside a hallway, the edge of a chair, the counter in the kitchen, the shopping cart, the slow pause before standing. All of these tiny interactions formed a new language of movement, a quieter one, a wiser one. Stability is no longer automatic. It becomes collaborative. And maybe that collaboration is one of the most human things about aging. One morning, Raymond stepped outside to collect the newspaper just after sunrise. The grass still held moisture from the night before. As he walked down the front path, he noticed himself placing his feet more carefully on the damp concrete. Years ago, he would have crossed the same path without registering its texture. Now his body noticed subtle conditions immediately: wetness, temperature, grip. And strangely enough, this awareness made him feel more connected to the world. Not less capable, more present. He was no longer rushing through environments unconsciously. He was participating in them. Movement had become a conversation. The ground says something. The body responds. The body says something. The pace adjusts. And in that quiet exchange there was dignity. There. A woman named Judith noticed her body changing during conversations at family gatherings, not emotionally, physically. When several people spoke at once, and she needed to move while listening, her pace naturally slowed, especially in crowded rooms, especially around quick turns or narrow spaces. She discovered that her body preferred processing one movement at a time now. Walk, then turn, then speak, then step again. And once she stopped resisting that rhythm, gatherings actually became less exhausting, because she was no longer forcing younger patterns onto an older body. She was listening instead. There is a certain peace that arrives when people stop demanding speed from themselves. The body often knows what pace creates steadiness long before the mind accepts it. And after 70, that pace may become slightly slower, not tragically slower, just more intentional. There was also a man named Calvin who noticed something curious while putting on his shoes each morning. He no longer balanced on one foot carelessly while standing. Without even realizing it, he had started sitting down first, not because he absolutely had to, because his body preferred certainty during transitions. One foot lifted, weight shifts, direction changes. These tiny movements had become more noticeable now, and instead of fighting that awareness, he began respecting it. The remarkable thing was that once he stopped trying to move like he used to, he actually felt calmer in his body, less rushed, less disconnected, more stable. Not because he had corrected anything, because he had cooperated with what his body was asking for. Awareness instead of control, listening instead of forcing, cooperation instead of resistance. As the day slowly comes to an end for many people over 70, something subtle often happens. Movement becomes quieter, not only physically, emotionally. People begin noticing the relationship between trust and motion, how different the body feels when rushed, how much steadier it feels when allowed to move honestly. Many older adults spend years trying not to appear slower, trying not to pause, trying not to reach for support, trying not to acknowledge small adjustments. But eventually, some discover something freeing. The slower step did not mean life became smaller. It meant movement became more conscious, more respectful, more real. And perhaps that is why so many changes in walking stability are misunderstood. Because from the outside, they can look like limitation. But from the inside, they often feel like adaptation. The body protecting confidence through awareness. The body choosing steadiness over speed. The body learning how to remain comfortable inside motion. And maybe that deserves compassion instead of embarrassment. You do not have to rush to prove you are still capable. You do not have to move quickly to validate your independence. You do not have to ignore what your body is quietly communicating. Sometimes wisdom arrives through pacing. Sometimes maturity appears through careful movement. Sometimes the body becomes gentler because it has learned how valuable stability truly is. And perhaps that is why so many older adults begin unconsciously giving themselves tiny moments before movement. A second before standing. A slower turn in dim lighting. A softer step on uneven ground. A hand near the railing. A pause before stepping off a curb. Not fear, not failure. Awareness. At the end of one long evening, a woman named Margaret stood outside her front door after returning home. The neighborhood was quiet. The air had cooled. She rested one hand lightly against the porch railing and stayed still for a moment before going inside. Not because she was tired. Not because she was unstable. She simply noticed the ground beneath her feet. the firmness of it, the steadiness of it. And for one brief second, she felt deeply connected to her own movement, to the pace her body trusted now. And suddenly, she understood something she could never have explained when she was younger. The slower step didn't make life smaller. It made the moment more noticeable. Have you ever noticed your body asking for just a little more certainty before moving forward? If this felt familiar, consider sharing your experience in the comments below. And if these quiet observations about aging, movement, and everyday life speak to you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us again for more conversations that help make sense of the changes so many people experience silently. Thank you for spending this time here today. Wishing you calm movement, steady awareness, and the quiet confidence to move at the pace your body trusts.